company holding every password you own, your bank, your email, your crypto wallet, got hacked and the attackers walked away with your entire vault. Not some of it, all of it. Encrypted, yes, but sitting in the hands of people with unlimited time and serious computing power to crack it open. If you're still using the same password manager you set up 3 years ago and never thought about again, what I'm about. To show you changes everything about how you approach this. Let's be exact about what happened, because the way LastPass described it and what actually occurred are two very different stories. In August 2022, LastPass announced what they called a partial breach. A developer's account was compromised, some source code was taken, but customer data was safe. That was the story. Then, in December of the same year, they issued a follow-up. Turns out, attackers had used that first access to get into a third-party cloud storage system. And what they found there wasn't just source code. They found backup copies of customer vault data, every website, every username, every encrypted password field, copied and removed. Now, here's the technical part, and stay with me because this is important. LastPass uses something called AES 256 encryption, which sounds bulletproof. And in theory, it is. Your master password is what generates the decryption key, and LastPass doesn't store that password. So even with your vault data, attackers need your master password to get inside. The problem is that the vault data itself reveals structure. Researchers who analyzed the breach found that website URLs stored inside vaults were not encrypted, meaning attackers immediately knew which services each user had accounts with. Your bank, your email provider, your crypto exchange. They could see all of that in plain text and use it to prioritize exactly which vaults were worth cracking first. Security researcher Vladimir Palant, who has done extensive analysis of LastPass's architecture, documented how the encryption iteration count, the number of times your password is scrambled before becoming a key, was set to just 5,000 rounds for many older accounts. The current industry recommendation is 600,000 rounds. What that means in plain language, older accounts were significantly easier to crack with modern GPU hardware. Palant published his findings publicly, and they're damning. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, one of the most credible digital rights organizations in existence, issued a statement recommending users change every password stored in LastPass. Not just some, every single one. Think about what that actually means. Your banking login, your work email, your healthcare portal, your children's school account, every password you've trusted to one service, now potentially exposed to people who have had years to work through the encryption. And here's the part that really set me back when I dug into this. LastPass had a prior breach in 2015, 7 years before the big one. And the response from the company then was essentially, your data is safe, your master password was never compromised, update your master password as a precaution, same playbook, different scale. The pattern isn't a series of unlucky events. It's a structural problem with how centralized, cloud-synced password vaults work. And if you think this is a LastPass-specific issue, you need to hear what comes next. Here's what nobody in the password manager industry wants to admit. The thing that makes them convenient is the exact thing that makes them catastrophic when they fail. You store everything in one place. That place lives on someone else's server, and that server is, by definition, a high-value target. Security professionals have a phrase for this kind of vulnerability, a single point of failure. It means that if one thing breaks, everything breaks. And in the case of cloud password managers, that one thing is a company you've never met, running infrastructure you've never seen, staffed by employees you've never vetted. Think of it this way. You've built a fortress around your most valuable possessions, then handed the only key to a courier company, trusting them to store it safely forever. Most of the time, courier companies are fine, but when they get robbed, and high-value couriers always get targeted eventually, your fortress doors swing open. 1Password, Bitwarden, Dashlane. These are all well-designed products run by companies with serious security cultures. I'm not saying they're negligent, but Bitwarden's architecture means your encrypted vault data does live on their servers. 1Password uses a secret key system that adds meaningful protection. Dashlane has shifted to a more privacy-forward model. Each handles this differently, and some handle it far better than LastPass did. But here's the deeper point. When you use any cloud-synced service, you're trusting that company's infrastructure, their employees, their third-party vendors, their backups, and their incident response forever. You're hoping that nothing in that chain ever breaks. According to data from IBM's Cost of a Data Breach report, the average time between a breach occurring and it being detected is over 200 days. That's 6 months of attackers having access before anyone knows anything is wrong. And password manager companies, storing some of the most sensitive data on the internet, are prime targets. The motive to attack them doesn't decrease over time, it compounds. So where does that leave you? Because just don't use a password manager without a real replacement isn't advice. It's just fear with no exit ramp. You have 4 real options, and I'm going to walk you through. Each one, honestly, including who each option is actually right for, because there's no single answer that works for everyone. Option 1 is hardening your current cloud password manager. If you're on Bitwarden or 1Password and you're not ready to change your whole system, there are specific things you can do right now to reduce your exposure significantly. First, enable two-factor authentication if you haven't already. Use an authenticator app, not SMS. SMS can be intercepted through SIM swapping attacks, which are disturbingly common. Second, review the encryption settings in your account. Bitwarden, to their credit, lets you set your KDF iteration count manually. Log into your web vault, go to account settings, then security, and look for the KDF settings option. The default is 600,000 iterations. If you're on an older account, verify this is actually set correctly. Third, and this one people miss, audit which email address is tied to your password manager account. That email is the recovery path. If that email account is less secure than your vault, it's the weak link. Lock that email down first. This approach works best if you have a large, well-organized vault you're not prepared to migrate, and you're using a reputable provider that isn't LastPass. If you're still on LastPass after everything I've just described, option 1 isn't for you. The trust is gone. Move on. Option 2 is local-only storage with KeePass XC. This is the approach that fundamentally solves the someone else's server problem, because there is no server. KeePass XC is free, open source, cross-platform, and your vault file lives on your device. Nobody else has a copy. There's no company running a backend. There's no breach waiting to happen at the infrastructure level. The file is encrypted with AES 256 and a master password you choose. You want to add a key file on top of that? KeePass XC supports this natively, and it means someone would need both your master password and the physical key file to open your vault. That's a meaningful layer. The trade-off is sync. Your vault doesn't automatically appear on every device. You have to handle that yourself through a USB drive, through your own cloud storage account like Proton Drive or Nextcloud, or through a self-hosted sync service. You control that chain entirely. For a lot of people, that sounds annoying. And honestly, it is slightly more friction. But you're trading convenience for something real. The guarantee that a breach at some company's data center doesn't put your 200 passwords at risk overnight. KeePass XC has Android and iOS companion apps. KeePass 2 Android and Strongbox are both solid. You can point them at a vault file stored in your personal cloud account and have full mobile access. This setup costs nothing. It takes an afternoon to migrate. And once it's done, your password security is entirely in your own hands. Option 3 is hardware security keys, specifically as a companion to your password manager or as part of a passkey strategy. A hardware key, like a YubiKey, is a physical device that plugs into your USB port or taps against your phone via NFC. It generates a cryptographic response that proves you're physically present. Attackers who get your password remotely still can't get in without that physical device. Here's where this gets interesting. Passkeys. The technology major platforms are now building around hardware key standards. Eliminate passwords for supported services entirely. Instead of a password, your device or security key holds a private key that never leaves your hardware. Google, Apple, Microsoft, and hundreds of services now support passkeys. When you log in, there's nothing to phish, nothing to crack, nothing to steal from a database, because the credential that authenticates you never travels over a network. Security researcher Troy Hunt, who runs Have I Been Piedoioned, has been vocal about passkeys being the most meaningful shift in authentication security in a decade. And he's right. A single YubiKey 5 costs around $40 to $50. Buying two, keeping one as a backup in a secure location, is the recommended approach. Pair this with KeePass XC for the services that don't yet support passkeys, and you've built a security architecture that's fundamentally different from trusting a company's cloud. Option 4 is the most complete break. Rebuilding your authentication strategy from the ground up with a combination of passkeys for modern services, KeePass XC for legacy passwords, and a hardware key as your second factor everywhere it's supported. This is what I moved to after analyzing this breach. It's not for everyone. It requires an afternoon of setup, it requires purchasing a hardware key, and it requires some tolerance for learning how a new system works. But what you get on the other side is an authentication setup that doesn't have a centralized target anyone can hit. A few important caveats before you make any decisions. If you're in an enterprise environment, your IT department controls your password management tooling, and changes like this need to go through them, not around them. If you have accessibility needs that make hardware keys or more complex local sync difficult, weigh that seriously. Security tools that you can't actually use don't make you safer. And if you're managing passwords for a business or team, KeePass XC's sync model has real limits. In those cases, a properly configured business plan with a reputable provider and enforced multi-factor authentication is a more practical answer than going fully local. Also, None of this replaces keeping your devices updated, using a reputable antivirus, and maintaining good basic hygiene. Password security is one layer, not the whole fortress. The password manager industry grew up telling you that you couldn't be trusted to manage your own security, that you needed them in the middle, storing your credentials on their servers, handling encryption on your behalf. And for years, the convenience argument won. It won because the breaches weren't visible. The risks felt abstract. The trade-off felt worth it. It isn't abstract anymore. 25 million people had their vault data copied in a single incident. Researchers are still documenting accounts being compromised from that breach years later, as attackers methodically work through the data they took. This isn't a theoretical risk, it's an ongoing one. Here's what I want you to take away from this. You don't have to live in fear of technology. You don't have to go off the grid or memorize 40-character passwords by hand. What you do have to do is understand that convenience and security exist on a spectrum, and the default settings you were handed when you signed up for a service were chosen for the company's ease of management, not for your protection. When you know that, you can make a different choice. The tools exist. KeePass XC is free and well documented. YubiKeys are affordable. Passkeys are being rolled out across every major platform right now. The infrastructure for a genuinely private, breach-resistant authentication setup has never been more accessible. What it requires is an afternoon, some intentionality, and the decision that your digital security is worth the effort. You started this video believing that your password manager was the safest place your credentials could live. Now you have a complete picture of what the risks actually look like and 4 concrete paths forward. That knowledge is yours. What you do with it is your call. One last thing. If you haven't done it yet, go to Have I Been PW'd right now. That's haveibeenpw'd.com. Type in your email address and see if it appears in any known breach databases. It takes 30 seconds. If your LastPass email shows up, that is not a hypothetical anymore. Start with option 2. Do it this week. If this is the kind of honest, no sponsor breakdown you want more of, subscribe and drop a comment telling me which option you're moving to. I'm particularly curious how many of you are already on KeePass XC and how you're handling the sync piece. That's the question I get most. And if you know someone who's still blindly trusting a cloud password manager after the LastPass breach, send them this. Awareness is the first step.